Good morning. Today we're going to make potato bread. This is a light, fluffy, yet firm white bread. The first step is to gather all your ingredients. We've got flour, sugar, 1 egg, of course our potato water, stick of butter, salt, and I've already went ahead and got the yeast started. 1.5 teaspoons of yeast and 1/2 cup of water with just about a teaspoon of sugar added to the warm water to help activate the yeast. Once you've got all the ingredients together, the first step is going to be take your potato water and your butter and melt it over low heat in a small pan. So let's get to that right now. Okay. Alright, one of the things that I like to do is to go ahead and cut my butter up into little pats. That way it will help them melt a little bit easier, just speed up the process. We want the butter to melt and combined with the potato water as quickly and easily as possible. Then we're going to let the butter potato water cool to about 80 to 90 degrees before we add it to our dry mix. So the lower temperature we can do that at, the quicker we can incorporate it, the quicker it'll cool down and be ready to mix. As you can see, I am measuring out 1 cup of potato water. Get that butter a little bit more melted before we incorporate the water. Got that nice and melted. Stir it up a little bit, and then we're just going to add the water. We're not cooking the water, we're just adding it to incorporate. So we went ahead and turned off the heat. Just mix it up real good. Alright, that's all for that part. Okay, the next step is to mix our dry ingredients. We've got our flour, and I'm going to incorporate a little air into it. It's just a cheap way of lightening and sifting the flour. Alright, so we got our dry ingredients. We're going to add them to the bowl. We've got our sugar, flour, a little bit of salt. So the recipe calls for 4 cups of white flour. We're initially going to add 3 cups to the mix and add the last cup as we mix the dough and start kneading it out to make sure we get the right consistency with the dough. So 3 cups of flour, half a cup of sugar. And then just simply a teaspoon of salt. Alright, and then of course we just stir our dry ingredients together just to mix them up. Okay, as we can see, our potato butter mix has gotten down to between 80 and 90 degrees, all fluctuation. So we're going to start incorporating we're going to add the potato water into our flour. Give it a good mix. Alright, just getting it ready, getting it started mixing. We're going to go add our yeast water. Again, just give it a good mix. It's going to be very wet and soupy because we've still got a cup of flour, maybe a little bit more to add in. Alright. Got it mixed up good. Last but not least is our one egg, well beaten. I'm going to set these out of the way. Alright, so mix. Alright, before we add that last cup of flour, we want this as incorporated as possible so that moisture is evenly spread out, so that will help us determine how much flour we're going to need. That's pretty good. So we'll reach in there, we get about a cup of flour there, and we're just going to add about half of that straight off. So we just added about half a cup of flour straight into the mix. So as you can see, the dough, while moist, is not quite as soupy. So this is about where we can grab our dough whisk and start working it with the dough whisk. Help bring all that together. Alright, so still moist, not going to be able to work it with our hands, so let's get that other half in there. We might need a little bit more. There we go. So the dough's starting to hold together a little bit better. And we need it to hold together before we turn it out on our board. Alright, today we're going to have to add a little bit more because I lied, it started holding together, then once I got incorporated it just soup back up. Alright. Alright. A little bit better. We're gonna throw it out on our board and see how it does. Alright. Scraper. Don't forget our dough scraper. That's going to help us keep it from sticking to our board. And it's going to help us move it around. So don't be worried about over flouring it at this point. You should feel how moist the dough is. We're working that extra flour in because we want it not sticky. But we want to knead it a little bit while we're getting it there, just to work those glutens. Alright, picking up all the excess flour because the dough, as you should be able to see, is coming together, is getting more springy, is smoothing out in texture. Still a little moist, a little sticky. It's more like Play-Doh at this point than it was when we started. That's where we want it to get to before we set it for its rise. Alright, so as you see, balling it up to go back into the bowl for the rise. It's a lot firmer than when we started. It's holding its shape. And it's still a little bit sticky because we need that moisture. We don't want it to be too dry when it goes in to raise because yeast likes water. Alright, dough goes back in the bowl. We're going to cover it and we're going to pop it in the proofing box. Okay, welcome back. Our potato bread is ready to be kneaded and divided, shaped, and placed in the pans for the second rise before it goes into the oven. But the first thing we need to do is go ahead and butter and lightly flour our bread pans. Alright, we got our 2 pans buttered and floured. Got a little bit of extra flour out on the board. Look at that. Nice, light, fluffy. Grab our dough scraper. And we're going to turn it out onto the board. So the bottom is nice and moist. So we're just going to get a little bit of flour and work it in. So we're going to stretch it. We're going to give it a little bit of kneading, not much. Just to see where we're at. It's very light and airy. Alright, so what we need to do is divide it in half. There we go. Stick half of it over there. Take your first half, work it out into a nice rectangle. Top is a little sticky. It's okay. Stretch, 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 stretch. It does not want to stretch at this point because those glutens have really taken a hold. But we want to roll it up. So we're going to stretch, we're going to stretch, we're going to stretch. Alright, got it. Not quite even. Got a rectangle. Take that first corner. Pull it in, pull it out, middle, out, in, bottom, in. Alright, pinch gently and roll. Giving a little downward pressure right there. Alright, now we go ahead and pinch the ends together, and we're there. Take a little bit of flour, dust it lightly because you want that whole loaf lightly floured. Alright, that's our shape. We're going to plop it into one of the pans just right there in the center. We're going to pinch that down good on that end. Alright. Get our second one. I think I cut it a little uneven. This one feels heavier. And press it out into its rectangle. Yeah, this is a little uneven. This one's definitely heavier. So pull, pull, middle, middle, bottom, bottom, roll. Roll it as tight as we can get it. Oops, that's pinch, pinch, pinch.
Twisting into the pan. Alright, well, yep, did not divide that evenly, but they're separated. They're in there. What we're going to do is cover them back up, pop them back in the proofing box for approximately 1 hour until they reach the top of the pan. Okay, our loaves have risen. They're ready to go in the oven. We're going to put them in at 375 for 1 hour. And you can definitely see the difference in the size where I didn't divide the dough evenly, but they're still going to taste fine. So let's pop them in the oven. Okay, there is the loaf of bread done. It should just fall right out of the pan. I'll set it right there on the cooling rack. Retrieve our second loaf. Again, should fall right out of the pan. I only did these for 50 minutes. Earlier I said do it for 1 hour, but you can tell that they're done with the nice tap. It doesn't have that hollow sound that a no-knead artisan loaf, round loaf, because it's a little bit, it's obviously a different mixture of the dough, but it's nice and soft, and it does have a good thump to it. Alright, so our bread is out of the oven, it's out of the pans, and it's onto the cooling rack. You do not want to cut your bread as soon as it comes out of the oven, because there is still moisture and heat trapped inside this nice crisp crust. It allows the bread to continue to form. I don't know if form's the right word. It's not quite cooking, but that moisture and heat that's trapped in there is still working on the bread, and you don't want to cut it and allow that moisture to escape, or it will cause the bread to dry out too much. So we're going to let it sit here. We're going to cover it while it finishes cooling down, and we can probably cut it in a few hours. Alright, so the bread has had time to cool. So we're going to slice it and show you how it looks inside. So here we have the sliced bread. You can see the nice even crust. It's nice and brown all around the edges. You can see the inside of the bread, the crumb. It's a nice even texture, and this is a well-baked, well-formed loaf of bread. Thank you.